destroy our marriage. Our love grew deeper for each other. And we thought, this is freedom. Everybody needs to know this. And so it was right after that. We were the children's church directors at our church. And we were heavily involved with the church. I was working for the George Washington University Hospital as an administrator. Ellen was a singer that, for all the big names that came to Washington, D.C., she was the opening act. Like for Ella Fitzgerald and Gene Krupa and Sarah Vaughan, and back in the 60s, the big names. And then when Jimmy Carter became president, he chose her band to be the entertainment for the presidential press. And so we were successful in the world's eyes, but we were not fulfilled. And then one day I heard a guy who was a missionary in Zimbabwe, and he came and shared how he'd going into villages that had never heard about Jesus. And he was changing people's eternal destinies. And I thought, man, that sounds fulfilling to me. I don't want on my gravestone, here lies a man who was able to buy cars, houses, and appliances. But I want to affect people's eternal destiny and introduce them to Jesus. And so I shared that with Ellen. She said, yeah, me too. So we thought, well, we'll just go into missions. I told our pastor that we wanted to go into missions. We were attending a kind of a unique church. It was a charismatic Southern Baptist.
It was a Baptist church.
Yeah. And the pastor said, well, why don't you, we'll get you lined up with Southern Baptists. We don't, theological, there are doctrinal differences, but I think, they'll take you under their wing. And so I met with the head guy, and after he met with us, he said, well, you have the credentials that we would accept, but your wife doesn't. So she would have to go to Bible school for at least 2 years. And I said, okay, we can do that. And he said, no, your oldest son would be at least 12 or 13. And when they're preteen or early teens, we don't allow them to go in the field. And they had all these rules. Do you realize neither Paul or Barnabas could be missionaries with you guys because they don't meet all your rules? And he said, yeah, I'm aware of that. He said, but these were the rules that came when I took office. So I said, okay, well, we need to, what do we look for in a mission organization? I don't have a clue. So we got our 3 kids together, and they were all young. And I just said, okay, let's ask the Lord, see if he'll give us advice, what to look for in a mission organization that we can submit to. And the first thing that we got was, it had to be a mission group that wanted to grow and reach more and more people for Jesus. Number 2, that it had to be a mission organization that believes that the Holy Spirit is as active today as he was in the book of Acts. He's not on vacation. And so we're going to go with someone who recognizes the Holy Spirit is active today. And the third thing, which pretty much wiped out 70% or 80% of all mission organizations in the 1970s, is that our children, we're going as a family, and they're not just being shipped off to some boarding school. And over the years, we got contracts saying, look, we'd like for you to be a hospital administrator for this country that we're involved with, but you have to sign that your children will go to boarding school, and then if you have any children on the field, once they reach the age of 5, they will be shipped off to boarding school. We just felt, no, I'm not gonna. We want to disciple people, but we don't want others to disciple our children. We want to be involved in their life as well. And 4 years passed. And I remember sitting in my rec room. I had a fireplace here. I had a big television there. It was off. and I had the stereo was going with praise strings, and I just thought, you know, I'm comfortable. So maybe God doesn't want us to actually go on the field. He just wants us to be supporters of missions. So I got Ellen and the 3 kids together, and I said, okay, let's ask the Lord if we're to go. And all 5 of us got, we're to go. So I said, okay, my biggest deal here is when. Because we've waited 4 years and nothing. I mean, those 3 points that God gave us, I thought would be something that most missions would have, but no. One even said, because of your experience of the Holy Spirit being real today, we would like for you to be one of our missionaries, but you have to sign a contract that you would not publicly or privately involve the Holy Spirit. And I was just surprised that all these things were coming. And so I said, now I know, kids, you can't write big words like January and February. So we're gonna have 3 columns. The first column, I want you to put a number between 1 and 31. The second column, you have to put a number between 1 and 12. And the third column is a big one, because this is 1,979. So it has to be bigger than that. Like, it has to be like 2,000 or something. And so you just pray and ask God to give you a number. And so we wrote down what we felt like God gave us, and we gave the pieces of paper to Ellen. And Ellen looked at all 5 pieces of paper, and she said, well, I know when we're going. We all wrote January 1, 1980. So our pastor said there is a Christian kind of personnel organization called Christian Service Corps, and they're located on 16th Street. They had the old Japanese embassy that during World War II.
16th Street where?
At Northwest Washington, D.C.
Okay.
And so they put our resume out. We were getting several offers a week. But as we prayed over them, they missed one of the 3 things that God told us we had to have. And when it got to be September, the position that I had at the hospital, I had to give a 90-day notice if I were going to quit. So September, I put my 90 days in. And that was an amazing time. Christians really, they were just saying, what are you doing here? You don't know where you're going, and you've already quit your job. You've already put your notice in. And you're a father of 3 kids. This is so irrational. But the non-Christians, they were coming to me and said, I respect what you're doing. As a matter of fact, there was one psychiatrist who's really famous. He's written a lot of books, and he's considered a big deal. But he would say the name of Jesus as a cuss word often. And I had to meet with him for a budget, for his 1980 budget. And as I was sitting in his office, he started to say, and he goes, oh, Art, I respect what you're doing. Yeah, I'm not going to use the name of your God as a cuss word again, out of respect for you.
Wow.
And then the hospital offered me, they said, if you will stay, we will double your salary. And Ellen had always wanted to have a record contract. And out of the blue, she was offered a record contract. And I just said, it's your decision, honey. But if you accept this contract, and I know that's been your dream your whole life, they will own you. And there's no possibility we could go to missions. But on the other hand, you'll make lots of money, and so I don't mind helping you spend it. And so we prayed and just thought, I have to turn this down. I said, I've been at this. I was 3 years at Holy Cross Hospital and 6 years at GW, and I thought I should have threatened to quit years ago. But we knew that if we accepted these offers, we couldn't go to missions, and that's what God had laid on our heart. So we turned it down, and it got so that we were, okay, I sat down with the kids, and I just said, we have to get down to 2 suitcases each. So all your bikes, all your toys, everything has to go. Our 2 cars, they gotta go. All our televisions, stereos, beds, everything's gotta go. And I thought it would be really hard for the kids. But they got excited about it. They were thrilled. And it was hard on me. I didn't realize that these possessions owned me. I didn't own them. I remember wanting to turn on one of our stereos, and Ellen said, "Oh, we don't have any more stereos. The last one we gave to this old lady who said she'd been praying for a stereo, and she was so excited that we gave her a stereo." And the same thing with cars and televisions and my king size bed and my lazy boy, and it was just like the house was being stripped to nothing. And I just was having a really hard time, but the kids said, this is the most exciting Christmas we've ever had. And then in December, it was Pearl Harbor Day, December 7th, I just sat the family down and I said, okay, we don't know where we're going, but in 3 weeks, we will not have anything except for 2 suitcases. We will not have a car. We will not have a house. I will not have a job. So we've got to go somewhere. So I've looked through all the offers, and this Bethel Mission down in Mexico City that runs an orphanage, they believe that our kids can be involved. They believe in the Holy Spirit. They just don't want to get bigger. They're downsizing because the smaller that I got, the more cooperative the Mexican government got. And so the kids said, but because of that, Dad, we got to know. And I said, but it's the closest one, So I'm going to go down today to the Christian Service Corps, and I'm going to tell them we're going to accept this one. And Ellen and the kids said, no, we can't. And I said, no, 3 weeks, we've got to know where we're going. So I went into the director's office, and before I could tell him that we were going to go with this Bethel mission down in Mexico, he got a phone call. And he said, it's a long distance phone call. Do you mind if I take this, Art? And I said, no, help yourself. And as he was talking, he said, well, we've had plumbers, we've had electricians, we've had doctors, we have nurses. I know we've got many occupations, but we've only had one hospital administrator, and he just happens to be in my office now. Would you like to talk to him directly? And he hands me the phone, and the guy said, my name is Colonel Eclipse, and I'm with Youth with a Mission. Have you ever heard of us? I said, no. He said, well, many people know us as the YWAM. Have you ever heard of YWAM? I said, no. He said, well, anyway, we just bought a luxury ship, and we're going to call it the Anastasis, and we're going to make it a hospital ship. And the United Nations have come to our president, Lauren Cunningham, and offered to refurbish it into a hospital ship on the condition that Lauren would sign his contract that he would transport refugees from Thailand to a country called Guyana in South America, because the leaders of that country have come to the United Nations and said, look, we're getting a lot of bad publicity about our land. We was out of our control. There was a guy by the name of Jim Jones who bought a bunch of land down there, and then thousands of people moved down there. Then he fed them poisonous Kool-Aid and killed them all. But before one of them died, they shot Jim Jones, and so now there's nobody that owns this land. So we want to give it to refugees. So will you transport? And Lauren said, absolutely. And he said, okay, but before we put $1 into your ship to make it a hospital ship, you have to have a qualified healthcare administrator. So he said, would you consider? And I said, well, let me ask you a few questions. Do you want to grow? And he said, absolutely. We want to reach the entire world this generation. Okay. It's a little more than I was anticipating, but yeah, it fits the bill. And I said, and what about children? Do you think that kids can be involved in missions? And they said, absolutely. We just had a King's Kids ministry, and one of our 11-year-old girls just led, he headed the mafia in Italy to the Lord. So yeah, children are very effective. And I said, well, what about, do you believe the Holy Spirit is active today? He says, absolutely. We don't know the languages of all those people, refugees. We just going to pray that the Lord will zap us with these languages as we transport them to Guyana. So, oh, okay. But I was fearful after that phone call. And I came and told Ellen that I didn't tell the director that we wanted to go to Mexico. And Vic asked if I would send my resume. And Ellen and the kids got excited right away, but I said, let me make sure that this YWAM is not a cult. So I called up a lot of the leaders, Christian leaders in the DC area, Maryland, Virginia. None of them seemed to have ever heard of YWAM. And then Ellen said, I think, one of the things is that you like things concrete, and what you're afraid of is there's so many vague things about this YWAM. And, nobody's given you anything that would substantiate that they're in the middle of God's will. She says, why don't you call this Vic Lipsy? And I asked if anybody knew about this Lauren Cunningham or Vic Lipsy, and nobody knew. But my mom, she said, I was watching a TV show called The 700 Club, and they had a guest on there, Lauren Cunningham. And she said, I was so impressed. I've never asked for a tape of the teaching of any show before, but I asked for a tape of this man. And she said, now, my parents' house was struck by lightning in July of 1979, and pretty much all her tapes were destroyed. They had good insurance, so the insurance rebuilt it, but all her teaching tapes were pretty much gone. She said, I got a brand new tape recorder, and I put this tape in to see if it would work. She said, but this tape recorder doesn't work. It's brand new and it won't work, so I'm thinking about getting my money back. And so she gave us this tape, and she said, you can try it. I know it probably won't work, but you might. So we got home, and we put the tape in after the kids went to bed, and we listened to that tape over and over and over. And we were just, here's not a servant leader who lords over people, but really serves. He understands what leadership is all about. And we were really impressed by it. And the next day, my mom called up, and I was at my office, and she said, I brought this tape recorder into the store I bought it, and they said, lady, there's nothing wrong with your tape recorder. You see this button here, it's called pause button. You undo this, it'll work perfect. She said, so it worked great. And then Ellen called me afterwards, and she said, I was so impressed with that teaching of that Lauren Cunningham. I brought it into our ladies' prayer group, and I said, look, I want you to listen to this. And she said, we brought it into 3 tape recorders, and it didn't work. And I looked at it, and it was charcoal black. And Ellen got so excited at God doing a miracle, but I was fearful. And I just thought, hey, how can you even know gravity will work if things like the burnout tape recorders work? And then that's when Ellen said, why don't you call Vic Lipsy and just find out what your responsibilities would be. So I did. I called Hawaii Kona, and I just said, so what exactly, as administrator on the ship, what would be my responsibilities? And he said, you just be responsible for everything.
Absolutely everything.
And I just thought, no, okay, you said you're going to have an intensive care unit on the hospital. You know, what if something breaks? You know, I don't know anything about the equipment there. Here, if something goes wrong, I called the people that sold it to me and said, you fix it or replace it. But we're out in the middle of the ocean, the Atlantic. You know, what would be my responsibility? It's just, you improvise. And so after that phone call, I was even more fearful than ever. And then our pastor called and said, oh, we're having a YWAM team do the service this Sunday. And YWAM was going to be the coordinators for a march on Washington, on the Capitol, that was going to happen, I think, April 1st, 1980. And so YWAM teams were coming from all over the world to Washington, D.C. And even in my own church, they were going to do the service. And so Ellen says, you know, this is a legitimate group, Art, and they fit all three things that God gave us. So I'm going to send your resume in. And I said, well, I'm still not sure. And I'm sending. So she sent it. And there was a guy that, Dean Curry, he had an office on K Street Northwest, a huge office, because he was in charge of the United States federal aid to countries worldwide. So he was some big shot in the government. But he was also a very strong Christian. And he said, I want Christians to come to my office and to pray for the government during your lunch hour. So I went to that meeting, and there was before the meeting started, there was this guy who stood up and he said, I have a message from God for somebody in this room. And this is the message. If you step out and do something that you have the ability to do, then you're going to take credit for it. But God is looking for men and women who will step out and be obedient to God, and knowing that they can't possibly do it unless God does it, so that God gets the full credit. And I don't remember anything else. I think it was a prayer going, but I wrestled with that word. I said, that's to me. And I walked back to the hospital, and just as I got there, I just, okay, God, if you want us to go with this YWAM group, I can't do this unless you're there. So, you know, if they accept this, that's where we'll go. And then my secretary, Shirley, just said, all right, you got a long-distance phone call from Hawaii. And I picked up the phone, and it was Vic, and he said, okay, we got your resume. And I said, yeah, I know. My wife said she sent it to you. And Lauren has looked it over, and he's accepted you, he's given it to the UN, and they've accepted you, so would you join us? And I said, if you had called any other time, I probably would have said no, but right now I know that this is our destiny, so yeah. So what do I have to do? He said, well, you have to do a DTS. I said, what's that? It's a discipleship training school. And, you know, it's a 6 months program. And I said, okay, where is that located? He said, well, all over the world, there's, you know, several hundred. But Lauren was wanting to know if you could come here in Kona, and so that he could get to know you. I said, okay, when's this DTS thing? When's the next one? He said, well, here in Kona, the next one starts January 3rd. But Lauren was wondering if you could come a couple days earlier. I said, January 1st. Okay, I thought that might be the date. So that's how we got involved with YWAM. And when we were doing our DTS on outreach, the United Nations went to the leaders of the different refugee groups, the Hmong and the Vietnamese and the Cambodians and Khmer, and they said they were sending him to this South American country, Guyana, and they said, no, that's a socialist government, and we've lost tens of thousands of our people were murdered by socialist governments. We don't want to go there. We want to go to America or Canada or England. So they came to Lauren and said, it's okay, we need to get out of this contract. So how much money do we have to pay you? And Lauren said, no, if you want to get out of it, we'll just tear it up. So then Joe Patali, when I finished my DTS, he was coordinating everything with the ship. And he just, well, the ship is stuck in Greece right now. and we're going to have to raise millions of dollars, and we've never had this experience before, so we don't know how long it's going to be. So we're not able to have you be administrator of the ship. So why don't you stay here and be on staff at Kona for school? So we staffed the next DTS, and then that was 3 months, and then we accepted to staff the second 3 months. And at that time, another guy came on staff who was the YWAM director for Thailand. And so we'd been in Kona for a year, and then Joe can't remember his name now, but anyway, he and his wife Colleen asked Ellen and I if we would join them in Thailand until the ship's ready. So we agreed, and so we went to Thailand. I thought, I'm terrible at languages, but it would probably be good for me to learn a little language and a little culture that's different from America. And so we were just going to go there for a few months to a year. But when we got to Thailand, my 3 kids and wife came to me and said, we really feel like this is where we're supposed to be. And so we sat down and prayed about it. And then I wrote to Joe Vitale and to Don Stevens, the leadership of the Anastasis. And I said, well, I'm afraid if you need a hospital administrator, you're going to have to look somewhere else because we're home. And I never saw the ship. It's out of commission now. And within 3 months, Joe Harbison and his wife Colleen, Joe came to me and he said, I was down in a Asian leadership conference with Lauren Cunningham, and I told Lauren that we were going to leave YWAM, and I asked his permission if I could put you in charge of YWAM Thailand. And I said, you didn't even ask me? Don't you think you should have asked me? And so we ended up being the leaders of the YWAM. And when I first got there, I didn't know the language. So there was already a ministry to the foreigners in the prison. And most of them were there for life because of drug-related stuff. And so I went to the warden, and he told us that we could have Tuesdays to minister to the foreign guys. And there was about 57 guys in there that were either American, Australian, or European. And the women, we were allowed to go on Friday, and it was only 6 women. And the guys seemed really open, and the girls were really closed. But the first person that came to Jesus among the prisoners was a Spanish girl by the name of Lolita. And she'd been there for 3 years. Come find out, when she had a boyfriend, she was living with him like they were married, but they weren't married. And her boyfriend would take trips to Thailand. And then one of his trips, he said, look, Lolita, when I go to Thailand, I want you to come with me. So she came with him, and come find out, what he did was that he would come to Thailand and buy about $5,000 worth of heroin. And he would take it to Europe and add powder and stuff to it and sell it for about $40,000 to $50,000. So he was living high on the hog, but then when he ran out of money, he would then go back to Thailand and buy more heroin. And she knew nothing of this. But when they got to the airport, the police had been tipped off. They found the heroin, and they were both arrested. And before they saw the judge, the boyfriend came and said, Lolita, you knew nothing about my dealings with the drugs. So here's a piece of paper. All you have to do is sign it. And it says that you knew nothing, that it's all me. So it was in Thai and English. Like, she signed it because she didn't speak any of those languages. She only spoke Spanish at the time. So when they stood before the judge said, well, this is an open shut case. Lolita says right here, her boyfriend knew nothing about the drugs. It was all her. So, boyfriend, you're free to go back to Spain. And Lolita, you're sentenced for 25 years in prison in Thailand. So we just said, well, Lolita, you've accepted Jesus right now. Our God is a God of justice. We're going to get you a lawyer, and we're going to get you free. So, we got a lawyer, and we came before the judge, told the judge that Lolita, 3 years ago, could not speak either English or Thai, only Spanish. And he started conversing with her in English and started conversing with her in Thai. And she now knows those languages because that's all she's had to do is study languages for 3 years. And he said, you people are wasting my time. You said that she couldn't speak these languages. And she's quite efficient in both. And I said, sir, 3 years ago she couldn't. Now she's had nothing to do but study languages. So yes, she can speak them now. He said, I know what's happening here. Lolita thought that our prisons were like the prisons in Europe, that she would be getting 3 meals a day and have nothing to do but watch TV. But our prisons are hard, you know. And so I'm going to increase her prison from 25 to 33. And if I see her face in my court again, wasting my time, it's going to go to 50 years. Do you understand? And I said, Judge, and then the attorney that we hired sat there and smiled. Didn't say a word, did nothing. And when I visited Lolita, I'm so sorry, this is, and she said, no. Actually, while she was in prison, we noticed that she had a Buddhist good luck charm, an amulet. And the guy that we were with, he's a German who, name is Daniel, who was coming to Thailand to buy heroin just like Lolita's boyfriend. But he accepted Christ and gave up that work. But when he saw Lolita with the amulet, as he volunteered to minister with us in the prison, and when he came to the guys, he had a great testimony. But when he saw Lolita, he just said, I thought you were a Christian. What are you doing with that Buddhist amulet? She said, well, my boyfriend gave it to me, and it is solid gold, so I was thinking of selling it. He said, no, that needs to go down the toilet. That's the only good thing for that. And they argued the entire time we were allowed to be there that Friday. And finally she agreed. But she said, the reason why I'm hesitant is because there's a murderer here. And she's very devout Buddhist. And, the toilets are right there for everybody to see so the guards could know where everybody's at. And so if I were to drop this down and that murderer sees me, she's made it very clear she doesn't like me. And I don't want to give her a reason to kill me. She's got nothing to lose. And so when I was there the following week, I saw that the amulet was gone. I said, so did everything work out? And she said, no. I looked and I saw the murderess. She had her back to me. So I said, this is a perfect time. And I lift up the seat and I dropped it down. She had turned around and she saw everything. And she came angrily up to me and she said, what are you doing that for? Don't you afraid? And she said, no. I know that you're upset with me, but I'm a Christian and I've got to get rid of anything that's not Christian. And she said, what do you mean Christian? She said, well, I follow Jesus. Jesus? I had a dream about Jesus. Tell me. And she led this murderer to the Lord. And she said, the last 3 years have been horrible, but this murderess, she's become my best friend. And we have Bible study together, we pray together, and life is so much easier. She said, actually, I used to be free, but really in prison. Now I'm in prison, but I really feel free. And then that attorney that sat there and smiled and did nothing before that judge, he wrote a letter to the King of Thailand. And that December 8th, 1981, the king gave Lolita a full pardon. And she was home by Christmas. Speed up 28 years. I no longer live in Thailand, but I take teams there every year. And I usually go to Chiang Mai or Chiang Rai, and sometimes Bangkok, Pittsburgh, or I've been down south a few times. But it's one city that's, Chiang Mai's here, Pittsburgh's here, right in the middle is a city called Lampang. And Sean has been working with a YWAMer who's Thai, his name is Pastor Ta, and he had set up this outreach in the Lampang area. And we were going to villages and sharing, and finally one of the guys on that team said, in my home country, I have a prison ministry. Is there any way we can get to the prison here? And I said, well, I don't know. I've never dealt with a prison here. I have done other prisons in Thailand, and the other prisons I dealt with are maximum security. This is a minimum security. I really don't know, but I'll talk to the warden and see if we can get in. So I went and met with the warden, and he said, no, don't talk to me about this. This is an administrative thing. My administrator handles that. You need to talk to her. So I found out her office and went in, told her that I have a bunch of foreigners. We want to come into this prison. We want to minister to the prisoners. And I said, we're Christian, so we're going to be sharing about Jesus. And she said, okay, when would you like to come? And I said, well, anytime that you say. We're available starting tomorrow. She says, okay, can you come start tomorrow at 8:30 and stay till 11:30? I said, yeah. And she said, well, you have to come a little early because I need to get copies of your passports. So great. So we came in the next morning, got our passports made copies of, and we were able to preach, do skits, and pray for the prisoners. And I was so impressed with the administrator that when I sent the team back to their guest house so they could have their lunch, I went into the administrator's office and I just said, look, I want to write a letter of saying, how efficient and professional, and I'm really impressed with you, and I want to write a letter to your boss with YWAM letterhead, but I don't know your name. And she said, well, I'm Miss Winnipon. And I said, and what's your first name? She said, well, everybody calls me Lolita. Lolita. So your parents are into Spanish names? She says, oh no. That's the woman that led me to the Lord. Her name was Lolita. So I've just accepted that name. And I said, now, back in 1981, I knew a Lolita that was in the maximum security prison of Chiang Mai. She's the one. She told me she led a murder to the Lord. She never mentioned she led a Thai guard, a policewoman, to the Lord. And she says, no, I'm the murderer. So right now, you're in charge of this prison, but you're the murderer? Yeah. Could you elaborate how this happened? And she said, well, I killed a guy, but it wasn't murder. It was self-defense. And all the evidence was there for me. But in Thailand, a man's testimony outweighs a woman's testimony. So even though it was self-defense, there was a relative of that man who said that I murdered. So I was given life imprisonment. And I hated everybody. I wanted to hurt everybody. I really was angry with the world. And so I did everything I could to let people know that I hated them. But once I accepted Jesus, and even after Lolita left, I wanted to help people. So I started helping the guards and the other prisoners. And finally, after a few years, the warden said, Lolita, you're not the same person that came into this prison. If I had the authority, I would set you free. I can't do that, but I can send you to a minimum security prison where life is so much easier. So when I got the lump on prison here, I helped the other guards, or I helped the warden. And the warden, he hated administrative work, and I enjoy it. I have some education, and so I did all the paperwork and everything. So he finally, he pays me a stipend. I have my own room with bathroom, and if it's administrative, I'm in charge. So I just thought, it's kind of like a Joseph thing. But now, as we were there in Thailand, the previous two directors that had been there since 1970, they only ministered to the foreigners, the tourists that come in. And I thought, well, here we are in a Buddhist and Islamic nation where hardly anybody has ever heard about Jesus. It was only 0.2% of the population were Christian at that time. So I said, Lord, are we supposed to get involved with the tithes? You know, we're now learning the language. So how do we plant churches, or how should we start a discipleship training school here? And there was a guy by the name of Deng became the new premier of China. And during the Cultural Revolution, they confiscated all the church's buildings. And now this guy, Premier Deng, in 1981, he said the churches can have their buildings back, their property back. So there were 70 churches along the border of Burma, Laos, and China, and between they only had 30 Bibles. So Open Doors and Asia Outreach, they got hold of 3,600 Bibles, and they needed volunteers to get those Bibles into China. So Eugene, he's a very famous guy, he's dead now, but anyway, he was in Thailand, and he asked if YWAM would take their truck. They need 3 trucks, and they had put 100 Bibles into guinea sacks, and he needed 3 trucks to take 12 of these guinea sacks. And so we had the YWAM truck, and we filled up the YWAM truck with 12 guinea sacks, so 1,200 Bibles. And we drove out of Thailand to the Sanborne River into Burma, and then we were hiring these boats. It was smuggler's paradise. They were smuggling heroin and jade and all kinds of stuff coming out of Burma. And then from Thailand, they were smuggling in videos and cameras and TVs and computers. And while we were there, and Eugene Morris was negotiating how to pay one of these boats to take these 3,600 Bibles across the border, where there were Korean Christians who were going to then throw them up on their elephants and take them into Thailand or China. So as he was negotiating, this military man came up to me, and he understood Thai, and he said, I know who you are. And I said, I don't think so, because I didn't even know where it is that I am. And he goes, you're the first white man I've ever seen in these parts. I bet you're a Christian missionary. I said, well, you're absolutely right. And he said, so, I'm the commander here. So I'll allow you to share about your God with everybody here. So okay. So I went to Eugene. I said, Eugene, we've been invited to share. And he goes, we don't have time. We're on a strict schedule. We got to get these Bibles to China. So I went back to the guy and I said, Commander, I can't stay, but I'll come back. And when I come back, will you let me share about Jesus? And he said, yeah. And when you do, bring that Christian invention. What in the world are you talking about? He says, you put a sheet of paper or a sheet up there, and then you project people onto the sheet. A movie. Yes, I know what you're talking about. So the Bibles got into China. When they got in, the governor said, all Bibles that are in China, I want you to bring to the government office. And they brought all 3,600 Bibles to the government office, and they stamped them with a seal. And then they said, anyone caught with a book that doesn't have this government seal on it, that person will have that book destroyed, and that person goes right to jail. So the church, we were involved, the churches took the Bibles, and they said, well, thank you for these Bibles, but don't bring any more. And I said, no, just give me a copy of that seal. I can give it to the Thais, and we'll have that seal put on for the next Bibles that we bring in. And they said, no, that sounds like it's unethical. And I said, no, it's Bibles. We got to get you the Bible. But what they did is they gave a sheet of the Bible to each member of their congregation, and they were to write front and back 10 times, so they multiplied the 3,600 to 36,000. And their testimonies were that I had a question from God. And right there, as I was making copies, God was like a school teacher. I had to write the answer 10 times. And so then I thought, okay, it's rainy season. I can't get into that camp, the Smuggler's Paradise right now. But as soon as it becomes the dry season, I'm going to go. And when it got to be dry, I had a DTS outreach team there. And I went around to Campus Crusade for Christ because they have videos. It's the Jesus film in different languages. And so the people there were Burmese, so I wanted the Burmese language. And they just said, all our movies are out, Art. I said, well, do you have any other suggestions? And so they gave me other suggestions of other organizations that had movies. And I went around and they were all out as well. And I just, well, if a movie comes in, please let me know, because I want to leave right away. And finally, the Baptists called me up and says, we have a movie that is done with Thai actors, and it's a reenactment of the Good Samaritan. And it's about a Thai businessman who's very rich, and he goes into the mountains, and there are bandits, steal his car, steal his clothes, beat him up, and leave him there to be dead. But Koreans, who are Christian, find him and take care of him and lead him to Jesus. So it's called Masareng Tirak, which means just a generic term for a village with love. And so I said, well, I'd rather have the Jesus film, but it sounds okay. I'll take this too. I'll take this. So we got the film, and I packed the DTS team, and we got on that road that goes to this, the village, the Smuggler's Paradise, and it started to pour down rain. And so we were just pushing our vehicle out of the mud, and we were planning to be there by 5 o'clock. It was 6 o'clock. I was covered with mud, and we were still several kilometers away. So I just thought, all right. We prayed, and I just felt like every one of these villages that we're passing, I've never heard of Jesus. So the next village we come to, we're just going to go there because I'm exhausted. So I went and spoke with the chief. I'm covered in mud, and I told him we want to share about our God. Would he mind? And he said no, and he says, well, here it's a Friday, and the school building is unoccupied until Monday morning, so you can stay there, and we'll bring you some food, and you can shower there. So and then you can share with us Friday, all day Saturday, and all day Sunday. So, okay, so that night we were exhausted, but we got the movie out, and we showed them this movie, and they responded so well. Matter of fact, we were up like 2 o'clock in the morning, and we were so tired. And so I just said, look, we need to go to bed. We're here all day tomorrow. We'll answer any questions, and we'll help whatever we can. So we're there all day Saturday and all day Sunday. Monday morning, we're leaving. And a school teacher came to me, and she said, so how long have you been planning to come to our village? We're only, about 300, 350 people. And I said, I wasn't planning to come to this village. I was planning to go to another village, but it rained, and our truck got stuck so many times, I was just too tired to go any further. He said, you weren't planning to come here? I said, no. Do you know the name of our village? I said, I haven't a clue what your name is. The name of our village is Masareng. The name of that movie. Masareng with love.
Oh, wow.
So I took that as a sign that I was on the right track, so that we were going to minister to Thai people. And as we started going to villages and sharing about Jesus, this one guy was visiting his relatives at this village, and he accepted Jesus. He went back to his village and shared with the chief that he's no longer Buddhist, that he's Christian. And the Buddhist priest came to him and said, if you're a Christian, you can't be Thai. because to be Thai is to be Buddhist. To be Buddhist is to be Thai. So we're confiscating your rice field and your house. You're kicked out. So he came to YWAM at our little base in Chiang Mai, and he came to me and he said, you know, you're responsible for my being kicked out of the village. So will you, as YWAM, take care of me and my family for the rest of our life? And I said, well, for a short time you can stay here, but no, God doesn't like middlemen. So you've got to go before God and get the answer from Him directly. You know, for right now, you can stay here. And then I went to one of the Christian leaders, Pastor Boonmark, and I shared with him what happened. And he says, oh, what's your work permit say? I says, it's from the king, from the Religious Affairs Department, and my job is to share Jesus. He said, we need to take you and show your visa to the chief. So we went, and Boonmark explained that the king has commissioned me to share about Jesus in the country of Thailand, and that he is the king over Buddhists, Islam, and Christians. And you can't kick this man out of his house because he's changed religions. So, sorry, the king, or the chief, told Kung Nguyen he'd come back. And then Boonmark said to the chief, can YWAM come in and share with you about Jesus? And so the chief said yes. Now, Kung Nguyen was back in the village, but he said people were spitting at his children, spitting in his well. They weren't treating him well at all. And so we had a team, and that team was led by a Canadian woman by the name of Gwen Berquist. And as we were praying who should share, I just felt like, Gwen. Pastor Boonmark, who was going to interpret, said, look, Art, she's a woman. She's not married, and she's under 30. You know, they won't accept her. You can't have a woman, a girl, share. Not in a Buddhist society. You know, if she were married, and at least over 30, yeah, they might listen. But a young girl, not married, there's no chance they'll listen. And we went back in prayer, and we really felt like, no, Gwen's supposed to share. She gave a wonderful message, and shared how, you know, if you take drinking water, you'll drink it. But if you put a bunch of dirt in it, you won't drink it. And no matter how much extra water you put in it, you gotta get rid of the dirt. And that's the way it is with our life. We gotta get rid of it. And so when she asked people to come forward to accept Christ, nobody came forward. But 3 families that week got together and decided that as a family, they wanted to become Christian. So they went to Kung Nguyen, and they told him that they wanted to become Christian. And over the next 6 weeks, we had different women share. Right after her, Julie Fitzgibbon, who was 19, she shared, and another 3 families came to the Lord. And then Judy Hayden from New Zealand, she shared, and another couple families came to the Lord. And then Ellen, my wife, shared. By the time I shared, I was like the 7th speaker, all women beforehand. So we had done it culturally incorrect up until then. But when I was sharing, there were already 20 families that had accepted Christ. And that was the fastest growing church I'd ever been involved with. And they changed the name of the village to the Village of the New Heaven. And there are over 50 families that have accepted Christ in that